Okay, so with the bottle built and the label on it, I'm going to continue bringing in the decals from the for all the rest of the panels. I have all the panels built on different layers. So I'm just going to review quickly bringing in those decals. So here it is in a shaded mode. So I'm going to go to front. And it is now, I have the front view set up in rendered. So what we have to do is select the panel, and you get the cross hash lines. And we go into our decal area under our properties and plus sign, and that brings me back to my art. So now here's the back panel. I'm going to bring that in. Planar, forward, okay. And all I have to do is select the top corner and then bring that down because the art is constructed the same as these panels that I have inside. So it's as simple as that. It's just a matter of doing it in the right orientation. So now this is in shaded, so we can only see our decal art in this rendered mode. So here it is. That's the back panel. Everything else is pretty much the same. So I'm going to go back to my layers and I'm going to bring in, let's do the top next. So there's the top panel with no art on it in rendered mode. So let's go view that from top view. So here it is non-rendered. It's in line. So I'm going to go to a rendered view. So we can't even see it. So I'm going to select it. There it is. It's a very, very light yellow line. It's there. So we'll see in a second when I bring in the art. So again, under properties, and I go to decal, select that. So I'm doing this from the top view to make sure that I have this on. You can do this in 3/4 view also. I prefer to do this just to make sure that I'm pretty straightforward. So let's find my, okay, here it is, my top. Double click on that. Again, it's planar, forward from this view. So I'm snapping to this top corner. And I'm snapping right to the bottom, and that's fitting slightly off. I think I probably built this a little not very accurately. All right, that should be fine. So we go to perspective. And there it is on that top view. So there's no art underneath. We can map on both sides, and I'm not doing anything on the back at this point. I'm just doing the views that I'm going to see in the renderings that I'm going to create. So we're going to go back to our layers, and let's do, we could start with the left side. So when I do my 3/4 view, I'm going to do it from the right side of the package. So I'm not going to see this outside panel, but I will see this inside panel. So this is going to get a little confusing because these have art on both sides. So I am going to map in a piece of art on the inside of this, which we are going to see from the right side. So in Rhino, they don't give us an opportunity to look at the left side. It's only right, and I'll show you how to distinguish between the two. So I'm going to map art to the inside of that. So we need to look at this from the right side, which is right here. And let's go to rendered, which will probably make this almost invisible. And there it is. I'm going to select that. Again, properties, decal plus, brings me to my art. So I am looking for inside. Momet is just the name of the product, so ignore that. So it's inside left side. So that's what I want. Same thing, planar forward. And I'm going to snap these two locations. Again, it's slightly off there a little. Okay, so if we look at that in perspective, so now I have the art on the inside, which we will see when I do the open view. The first view I'm going to set up will be closed, so all these internal panels will not be visible, but I'm going to set them up now so they're ready to go. So that's that panel. So now I'm going to go back to my layers, and I'm going to look at my right side. Let's just turn off that. So it's actually top we can stay. So let's just turn off left. Okay, so now I have this panel. It is going to have art on both sides, and I will see both of those. When it's closed, I'm going to see the outside art, and when I open it up, I'm going to see the inside. So I'm going to map on both sides of that. So this will be good to take a look at that. So let's do the outside first. So I'm going to look right side. I'm going to select that, properties, decal, plus I'm looking at the side of the box, which is right here. It's the logo in this orientation, right side. Select that, okay. So I will map that right here. And let's take a look at that perspective. So there's the outside piece of art on there. So that'll be good for the 3/4 rendering, which will be approximately in this view. So I'm going to map the art on the inside. So when I open this flap, it's ready to go. So this gets a little confusing since we don't look at these panels from the left. We only have right, which is basically side. So I'm just going to select this panel and go back to right side. I'm going to put another piece of art on here on that other panel in this orientation. So this is a little crazy. So I'm going to do plus for another one. And I'm going to bring in the piece of art, which would be the right inside, right side inside, which is this one. I'm going to double select that. I have it planar, and I have, instead of forward, I'm going to do backward. So if we select backward, it will put it on the other side. So I'm going to select that and say, okay. Now I have to put it on here. So I'm going to select the 2 points. So right now we can't see it from this view. So I'm going to map it on the panel and say, okay. So if we go into perspective, we should now see that on the inside, and there it is. So that's a little confusing, but that's how they do it here because we don't have a left side orientation. But what's nice is we can map art on both sides of these two-dimensional surfaces. So that's actually quite convenient. All right, so that's that side. Let's see what we have. Let's go back to our layers. Let's bring in, what else do we have here? I'm going to bring in, okay, so we have these 2 panels. Okay, we have those, which I had mapped in last time because we used that to inform the cut edges on those panels. I think I have the dividers, okay, with color and not use the piece of art because the piece of art is essentially just blue. So let's talk about that. I'm selecting this bottom panel, and I'm going to go into my properties, and I'm selecting this little paint tube, and I'm not going to use the layer material. I want to use a custom color that I had set up. So I had set up this color, and you can click on this, and you can bring in your RGB color. So I brought this in from Photoshop. I selected it from the piece of art and just made a flat blue that I'm going to use to color these 2 inside panels. I'm not going to use the art for that because, like I had mentioned, those are pretty, basically they're just blue. So I have set up that color. I'm going to use that here. I think I could probably just do the same thing with this. I'm going to select the top one, and I'm going to use my custom color and just make that the blue. So that's what I'll use for those 2 inside panels. Let's see what we have left. Going back to my layers, we have left, we had done that, and we have top, top, That's ready to go. I think the dividers, I have those mapped already because it's going to be the same. Oh, the fronts here. That's what I'm looking for. These two fronts, same process. I just brought in the panel and just mapped the art in, so we don't have to go through that again. Okay, so I think I have all of my panels all set up. I have my two front flaps. So that's all I'm going to need to do the closed view. So what I'm going to do, let's look at this in the front. All right, so I'm going to select this. I'm going to move this. I'm going to go to my move tool here. I'm selecting this bottom corner here, and I want to put this in position in the front of the box, right here. So if we go into perspective, so what I have now is this front panel is exactly in the same place in space as these two other panels behind that. And you can see the art is coming through. So the program gets confused. What do I want to show? You know, what's in front of the other, because they're exactly in the same planar location. So we need to move that around a little bit. I'm going to sort of fake that in this program and just move it out slightly. So if we go to the top view, I'm going to go to probably wireframe, view, wireframe. And here it is. Okay, so I'm just going to move in a little bit because this needs to be pretty subtle. So I'm not really going to snap anything. I'm just going to move that panel just a little bit. I barely moved that, very, very tiny, so we won't even be able to see that. So let's go back into perspective. And now that looks pretty clean. So it's not confused. So this panel is now definitely in front of these other two panels. So that's sitting there perfectly, and the art looks nice. So I'm going to do that with this other part over here. I'm going to move that over, and then that has to sit in front of that panel so we can get that nice kind of layered view. So once I have that all set up, I'm going to select all of this and move one copy. So when I have that all set up, you go under where this move tool is here. You can go to the commands, but I'm using this tool right here. It says move copies, where we have these multiple squares. So if you select that, select everything, I just move it forward, or you can move it however you want to move it. And then right click, and it'll have moved a copy. And then I select all of those components and I move them to another layer. I try to keep everything separate. So this other layer that I have will be box closed with art. So I'm going to select that and I'm going to deselect everything else. Deselect the layers. So now so I don't have the art on this side. I could put there, if I'm going to do an animation or something like that, I might want to put that art. If I'm going to show it from that view, I'm going to put that art. So, but I'm going to just show this kind of a 3/4 view closed. And I'm going to take this also and open it up, put the bottle inside to show it from that view. So this is ready to go. I don't have. So now that we have the art set up for the rendering for the closed view of this box, I'm going to continue and manipulate the geometry and add additional art to show the open view of this box. Let's get back to our layers. Right, so I have done this. I'm going to set up another layer. So like I had mentioned before, I'm keeping all of this on separate layers. So I'm going to select all of this. I am going to move one copy. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to move this forward. So I'm taking all of this. I'm going to move a copy and then I'm going to change that to another layer. So I'm going to move it forward and then right click. So now the close view I have where I wanted it, and I moved a whole copy here towards the front. So what I want to do is take that. Let's go to top view. I'm going to take this geometry in the front here. I'm going to select that. And I want to change that to this new layer that I created, which is box open with art 2, because I have the other one already set. So if you go to this little hammer here, and we can change object layer. So I'll click on that. And that should now be on this layer because I have the blue. I put the check mark and it's selected. So I'm going to deselect the closed art. And there it is. I try to keep these separately. So if I bring in both these layers, they're not on top of one another. So I just keep moving them all over the place. So it should work out fine. Okay, so here I am with this geometry here. So I have all the panels on the inside ready to go. So now I need to start to move this around and open up the box so I can have that. So I don't need rendered view right now. So let's go to shaded. Let's start with that. So I'm going to select these side panels. I'm going to flop them open first. And I'm just sort of figuring out what this might look like as I open this. So we'll see how this geometry works. Since I went through this, it worked out pretty well. So I'm going to go to top. Let's move in. So I'm going to rotate these panels. I'm going to rotate this, and I am going to turn off orthographic. So for rotating, we need to select our pivot point first. And then I'm going to select over here. And now I want to do this. I'm going to do this at exactly 45 degrees. So up in my commands there, I can write in, this is 45. So that now move that out at 45 degrees. We can see that open. And the art is going with it, which you can't see right now. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Rotate. My center of rotation is selecting the end of the panel. And I'm going to come out this way. So this time it's going to be negative 45. I'm going in the opposite direction. So I'm just selecting negative 45 and entering. Now I have those out there. So what we need to do, obviously this front panel, I need to flip it around 180 degrees and attach it to that panel because that's the sequence of the opening experience. So we're going to do that. So I'll do that from the top view. So I'm going to, again, rotate. I'm going to select that point as accurately as I can. And I'm just going to select this over here. And again, this will be a negative 180 degrees. So now we know that that's perfectly flat and perpendicular. So what I need to do is move that. I'm going to select the edge of that. I'm going to attach that to this panel because that's where it's connected on our dye line. So now we have that sitting out flat like that. It doesn't have to be flat. It's just easier for me to manipulate the art. Every project's going to be different. So you have to make a judgment call about how you want to do things. Sometimes it's easier to open up the geometry in a certain orientation. but it might look a little awkward when you finally do your perspective rendering. So sometimes you might want to manipulate a little bit. Sometimes you might want to I'm going to open up this art and I'm going to decal the inside of this. So it's very easy for me to decal it when it's perpendicular to the front plane. But the drawing might look nicer if I change the angle of this panel. So I could open it up, decal it so it's easy, and then after it's decaled, then I could manipulate the angle and make my point of view on the open structure a little nicer. So it is a judgment call that we're all going to have to make, depending on our project. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Oops. Let's see if I can select that. Yes, got it. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this. And this will be 80. So that's out there. And then let's go to my move tool. And I'm going to snap that right to here. Okay. All right, so that's relatively easy. So just remember, I have all my art on these panels. I don't need to show that right now, but when I do go into rendered mode, it'll be all set. So the tricky part is these little gusset corners that come from my die line. I didn't build them in 3D to be working for this view, but I did build them in the die line to these little corners here. Move this over here. And now, oops, I'm going to right select, deselect the original, and select this new copy. And I'm going to bring that over into our open art layer. Go into this little hammer, change object layer, and then deselect the die line. So now I have those two lines. These are not, let's go into shaded. So those are just lines. So I can't really use those to do the rendering. So I need to make this into a surface. So I'm going to use my line tool and I'm going to snap. Let's put on snap back on. So I'm snapping to this end and double click there. It says connect. If we select that and we select one line, all right, it's not connecting. Okay, so let's try, I connected them, but it's, let's go into properties. All right, so it's a closed curve, so it didn't quite work. So I need to, let's go to my surface tools. And if I select this, surface from planar curve, I'm going to click that. And that is now created, so we can see the ISO lines in there, and we've created this surface. So now this is a surface that I can use for rendering. I know it's connected in this corner, so I'm going to select this. Surface, and I'm going to move it. So I'm going to snap. Let me move in here so we can see a little better. So I'm selecting that little corner down there, and I'm going to bring it in. So I'm bringing it through. That's why it got so big. I'm bringing it through space. It was way in the back. So I'm going to click that because I know that that's where that point is connected. So what I need to do is rotate this into position from the appropriate view. So this. All right, so I'm going to rotate that to get that point down to here, and then I'll rotate it again from another axis to get that into position. Rotate, center of rotation, snap up to the top here, and snap that right to there. And then we'll go to perspective and we'll see where that is. Okay, so that's that part flat. So I need to now from the front view, rotate that down. I know this is a little confusing and every project is going to be different. I want to go to front. So I'm kind of familiar with this geometry, so I have an idea of how this is going to rotate. So you can see this light yellow line is the selected part. I'm going to go back to rotation. And I'm doing this from the front view now. And I'm going to snap to this intersection here. And I'm just going to select the other side. And I'm going to bring this down. So I did this before, so I know approximately where it is. It's a little bit past that ISO line. It's about here. It's pretty close. So this accuracy is only for picture making. So we'll see how this is going to work. Okay, so I think the next step is I need to mirror this. Let me see if I'm going to mirror this from the top or not. Let's go back into perspective. So you see how that flapped down? So I need to mirror that part over on that center line. So we're going to do this from the top view. And we'll take a little check here and see if I got this correct. Because once I get this correct, then all I have to do is mirror it around 4 times. So the mirror tool is under this grouping here, and it's right here, mirror. So I have it selected. So I'm going to select this point, and I want to mirror along this center line right here. So that's actually not bad. I'm trying to get that to line up accurately on the other side. So let's see if that works. It's a little off, but for making a picture, it might not be bad. So it looks pretty good. It's slightly misaligned down here, but it's not bad. I think that looks pretty clean. So I'm going to try to work with that. I think that should do okay. So maybe it's time to take a look at the rendered view. Let's see what we have. Okay, so we have all the inside panels. We have this little gusseted corner ready to go. So I don't have any art for that gusseted corner. So I think what we'll do is just make them the blue color that I used for some of those other parts. So let's just select those and we go into our little paint tube. And under here, we can go to this custom color that I have set up. Yeah, so I think that'll look nice. Those will be blue and then it'll contrast nice against the yellow background. I mean, they could be yellow, but I think this is how we decided to do this in the final. Okay, so that looks pretty good. All right, so what I'm going to do is select these two. No, not the top. That. Oh, shift, yeah, different command. So I'm going to go to front view. And then all we have to do is mirror this around 4 times. So I'm going to go back to my mirror tool right here. And I'm going to use snapping to the center of this panel right here in the middle. And I will mirror, and I'll snap down to here and that mirror that over to that side. So now I have to go and mirror those. See, now it's on the other side, so that's perfect. Let's just turn this over. I have the other two aren't selected, so I need to select all of these. So I'm going to select and shift. Should give me multiple selections. And then I'm going to go back to the front view. All of this can be done in the perspective, but I just like to look at it in the view that I'm working in. It's just sort of a preference I have. So I'm going to mirror those again down to the bottom. And I can select any of these lines here on center. So I'll just pick this one. And I do, under mirror, I do have it on copy, by the way, up here. I have it on copy because I had that set up from before. I'm just snapping to the center of this other line here. And there they are. So those are the gusseted corners in position. So I know that's relative to my design here. Everybody's design will be a little different. Sometimes it's a little crazy to figure out how the geometry is going to fold. That's why it's very helpful to have our mock-ups so we can really see what's happening. And that helps us inform us to how to construct the geometry in the 3D file to make our renderings. So we need to map on the art on these front pieces. This should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to go to front. Let's back up a little. I'm going to select that part. And so we can see what I'm doing, I'm going to go into view, rendered mode. Just move this over. So with that selected, we can go back up here and we can go to decal. Now, this part already has a decal. This is the decal that I have on the front. So I'm going to map another decal on the back of this part. So I'm going to select this again, and I have to find the piece of art that's the inside, which is this one right here with the usage direction. So I'm going to double select, double click on that. Again, planar, and it's forward because I do have this parallel to the front plane. So this time I'm just going to map to this inside corner here. And then I should be able to bring this art down. So I don't have another corner to snap to because I cut it off. So I'm just going to sort of guess a little bit and make sure I clear the part. That looks pretty good. And there it is. And then we'll do the same thing on this side. Select this part. Again, it has a map on the other side. So I'm just going to add another map on this side. And the inside is, here we go. I have this piece, planar forward. I'm going to snap to the top and bring that down. And I don't have another corner, so I'm just going to kind of guess and get that as close as I can. And there we are. All right. So that's most of our art. So you can see this little white ring I have around here. So when I built my bottle, I built the bottle very accurately. Perfect. So when I trimmed out this panel, it was line to line. The reality is I set up this art with a little bit of a tolerance. That little extra space was required. So when I build my mock-up, that the bottle will fit. So it's not too tight. So I think when some of you made your mock-ups, some of these cutouts that we did were a little snug. So you could see how the bottle was a little too tight. So these are some of those tolerances that we need to incorporate. So for picture making, it's not as critical, but for the actual mock-up, it's very critical because it makes it work or not work. So I could just take this decal off and make it the color. I'm just going to leave it for now, but we'll see this little white ring, and that's why that's there, because the art has the tolerance for that hole. Okay, so what we need is the little tab over here. So I'm going to go back to the die line. Let's go back to my layers, and I'm going to go back to the die line and bring that in. And it's back there. So let's just move that up. This is that little tab. So now this is done in line work. So it's a closed line. So again, I'm going to go to front view. Again, I'm going to move a copy. I'm going to move this over here. And then right click. So I moved a copy and then stopped copying because it'll continue copying. I do want to take this though. I'm going to leave that one there because that's part of my die line. I'm going to take this new copy I made and I want to change the layer to where I am working right now. So again, it's this little hammer, change object layer. Oh, I'm not on there. Make sure I'm on that object layer. Object layer. Okay, now I can get rid of die line. So now I have this little piece of line work here. I'm going to select this other one from that little gusset corner, just delete that. I don't need that anymore. So again, we can use the same tool. So I'm going to select this. And if we go over to our properties, it tells us it's a closed curve. So those lines are all connected, a little bit different than that gusseted corner. So if you remember correctly, what I did was I went over to this little donut looking thing. It says surface from planar curve. So if I select that, it turns that into a surface. So now I can work with that. We can see that in the rendering now. So let's move that. I'm just going to still snap to its center here. Move this down. And I'm going to select to the center of that panel right there. I think that's where that's aligned on my die line. So let's take a look at that. Let's see if I did that in space. Okay, so that's sitting there. So here's an example where it's lined up perfectly with this piece of art. Kind of really doesn't look that natural. So I'm just going to bend that forward just to make it look a little bit more interesting. This is a little kind of arbitrary. So let's just go to the top view. Let's move this over and we'll go to rotate. Snap on that point. Now this isn't really that critical. I'm just going to move it in to make it look like it's a little bit more natural to show that that is a curve there. So let's go back into perspective. Okay, so there's my box open. So it's a little strange that these two wings, these two flaps are perfectly flat out. I mean, I could probably angle them in a little bit. It might look a little bit more natural. So that's just a judgment call depending on your structure. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. As you can see, I don't have the bottom of my box. All I would really need to do is just bring down a flat panel, snap that down there and make it, well, yellow or blue, whatever I would like that to see. This panel in here should be blue. I will probably do that when we go into the rendering. So the one part we're missing is the bottle with the label on it. So let's see, where do I have my bottle? Right here. And the bottle is hiding in the back. So what I'm going to do is I want to keep that bottle in position where I have it. So again, I'm going to move a copy. Let's see if I can just move that forward. Okay, so I'm going to move that forward, right click. So now I have two bottles. I want to keep the one in the back where I have it on that layer. So I'm going to take this new bottle and I want to bring it to this new layer here. So I'm going to select this layer, go to my hammer, change object layer. And now that should be on this layer. And I can test that by going back to my bottle layer and deselecting that. So there it is. So I want to put that into the package somewhat accurately into this little hole that we have at the bottom. So I'm going to go to top view. And it's back up. I can see where I am. And this bottle is probably back here. So let's see if I can move this. Since I have my centers on, I'm going to select the middle of that. And put that in there as accurately as I can. But something's a little off. So let's move this over. I'm going to go back to my move tool. There. Okay, let's take a look at perspective. You can see that little white ring. So probably what I should do is just take off that decal and make that blue. So that little ring would go away because the art on here really isn't that critical. So there's a couple of little details I can finish up there. But this is good. See, this flap looks kind of natural. Again, that's white. It could be okay because we do have some white in here. So it looks like it works. It could be yellow. That might be a better decision. I think we left it white in the final? I forgot. So those are some of those decisions we can make by looking at this. That's why this is very helpful to create these images for our workflow and also to present to other people. That label is sitting right on that edge. That label could be positioned a little bit higher. That might look a little nicer how to do that. Okay, so that's the end of this. So the next section here, I will talk about actually outputting renderings. Once we have the art all mapped in and all the geometry built, and we have our panels in the right position, just a matter of exporting renderings. So if we go to our properties window over here, my rendering icon wasn't here. So if it isn't in yours, if you put your cursor up here and right click, there are all of these options. If you click on them, you can get the icon to be in this properties area. So I had selected rendering down here and it brought in this little spherical shape. So I had my rendering capabilities set up in this window. Okay, so this view, I'm not doing anything very fancy. I'm using everything that's pretty standard in setup. So as far as setting up this view, I just sort of used my navigation tools here for my window, set up a pretty good point of view. So it has this automatic 3-point perspective set up. And I'm not doing anything with the lighting. I'm using the existing lighting. So I'm keeping everything pretty standard. And I'm probably even going to use this viewport here, which we'll talk about. So if you click on this rendering icon here, all these options come up, and I'm not changing a lot of what this is. Using the current viewport, and I did go into custom. I was playing with the numbers here. I wanted to see how long it takes to render. But I did click on lock to viewport aspect ratio, which means this ratio right here, this whole window, this white area where my image is sitting, it'll maintain that viewport. So let me just move it over this way a little bit so it's centered. So what I'm thinking to myself, I'd render this out and I'll have a JPEG and I can just trim it down and do what I want with it because I'm not doing anything with any backgrounds. I do have a surface at the bottom. That's what's creating this little shadow at the bottom. I'm keeping this very clean and very simple. So it's up to you to play with some of these settings. If you want to have it a little bit more involved, it's perfectly fine. I'm just going to show very straightforward exporting and rendering. So I have it on that viewport. I'm going to keep the proportion ratio, and I'm just doing it relatively small because it does take a while for these renderings to be created. So I did like 11 inches wide and automatically set up this for 4 5/8 inches high. And I just have it on good quality, not even high quality. I'm just using a solid color here. So there's a lot more options down here in what you can do. So you can play with those. All right, so once you have that all set up, then it's a matter of just clicking render. And then this window will come up and it's a little pixelated, but down here it'll talk about the time it has to render. So here's your seconds going by. And then we have these two numbers. This first number that's flicking quickly. And what that number needs to do, it needs to catch up with that 500. That's the goal. So you can watch the numbers come up. So it does take a few minutes. We don't really have to sit here and look at that. So this is actually a pretty small picture, but it's not bad. The quality is really good. So depending on what kind of quality you have or want, whether you're going to show it on screen or you're going to print that, you can do as high quality as you want. And that's it. So once that is set up, it's a matter of exporting the JPEG. So here we have the little picture of the floppy disk, and it says save image as, and you can number it and save it out. And it'll be a variety of different formats. I just saved it out as a JPEG. So that's the last part, saving out the rendering. I will do another tutorial. I'm bringing in the 3D data file into Keyshot, and we'll go through the process of doing that with Keyshot. I think you have a little more flexibility in rendering and the quality and backgrounds and views and a whole series of different things. So that'll be a whole different one. So it has finished. Like I mentioned, you can click on here. And I have a bunch of other things. So it's a JPEG. So it's just a matter of naming it and you can save it out. So that's it. That's creating the renderings in Rhino.